Written back in 2004 as a light novel and eventually adapted into an anime in 2010, Ryogo Narita's Durarara is one of the most complex animes I have ever seen. With its bombastic cast of characters, deep intrigue and genre subversion, and its interwoven narrative, I found myself salivating at the idea of talking about it in depth with you guys. Hello and welcome. Please take a seat. Today, I am starting a new project where I am going to be going over each and every episode of Durarara and talking about every detail from narrative motifs to character motivations and picking apart the story so that we can make sense of it all because there is a lot going on. And honestly, I cannot wait to talk to you guys all about it. So, with introductions out of the way, let's begin. Episode 1, Exit 1, First Words. Right off the bat, we are introduced to three major things within the story. Well, I guess four, but the fourth one isn't that important, but I'm going to be talking about it first anyways. The anime begins with the opening credits and theme song. Most modern animes start with a cold open to really hook in the viewers, or simply have the first episode play uninterrupted, saving the theme song for later. Durarara does the opposite, launching straight into its opening, partly because this song is an absolute banger. I mean, just listen to it. Okay, that's enough, I can't play that much. But also because it serves as a visual roster. With a cast this large, and there is a lot of fucking characters, guys, the credits double as a cheat sheet, imprinting faces and names before the chaos begins. Now, onto the juicy stuff. Immediately after the opening, we hear someone waxing poetic about an unknown event and what amounts to the mundanity of fate while seeing a yellow-helmeted motorcyclist on a black bike that neighs like a horse. And what this does is introduce the audience to the different storytelling devices the anime uses. In every episode, we get a bit of a mirrored storytelling, along with spiral storytelling. And what I mean by this is there is always a narrator in the background of each episode, explaining something that has already transpired or is about to transpire in third person about someone else or sometimes themselves. I know, convoluted, confusing, but stay with me. And while they narrate, we see the events that sometimes match what they're saying or what transpires before the event the narrator is talking about. So, like, say they're explaining the weather that night, but we're seeing the episode begin in the morning before the storm comes. It's kind of like that. And this is what I called the mirror effect. The spiral is how the narrator will often begin their story with something very obtuse, broad stroking poetry or monologues that often don't mean anything to the viewer yet. But as events unfold visually, the narration becomes more focused until the end of the episode, where everything starts to make a little bit more sense. We are also introduced to the subtle subversion work this anime does. While the narrator of the first episode is Mikado Ryogamine, and he introduces himself very quickly, the first person we get to see visually is Selty Sturluson, the motorcyclist. The subversion here is that Mikado seems like he would be the main character, as he's the first name we learn, but that actually isn't correct. Remember how we just talked about the opening and how it gives us all of the names as a full roster for the cast that we get to meet? Guess whose name is the first one we see? It's actually Selty's, before Mikado's. And that's because Selty is actually the main protagonist of the story, or at least the emotional through line of the story. But you won't know that until much later in the anime, or you might not even know that until you look up notes from the author stating as much, like me. It's a great subversion of viewer expectations. And there's this run-on joke throughout the anime that Mikado's name sounds like the main character of an anime or a manga. And this continues the subversion, as we learn that he is simply one of the many lenses and stories that fill Ikebukuro and helps amplify Selty's own emotional journey. Finally, this opening really gives us a good look at Mikado as a character and Ikebukuro as a character as well. I know, that was a lot to talk about, and we haven't really even started the anime to begin with, so let's continue. We learn through his narration that Mikado has just moved to the big city after living a somewhat sheltered life in a small town somewhere else in Japan. He never went out on class trips to the city, and this is his first time in a very urban environment. We see he's feeling overwhelmed and out of place, until his friend, Kita Masaomi, finds him. The two are visual opposites, which reflects their diametric personalities and introduces the viewers to the importance of colors in the anime. But more on that later. Mikado is in a jumpsuit, very practical with short black hair, while Masaomi is in a hoodie, bleached blonde hair with earrings and bracelets to match. With Masaomi dressed in urban wear and having a modern look, he is the visual representation of the difference between Mikado's past and the possibility of his future. There's something else I want you to pay attention to as well. The people in the background, they're all in grayscale. Unpolished silhouettes of humans filling up the space of what's supposed to be a big city. They are faceless and lack personality because they are unimportant to the story. This stylistic choice has a much deeper meaning later in the anime, and is a brilliant bit of subversion that I haven't seen an anime ever do since. But I'll explain that more when that moment eventually happens. Through their interaction, we get the sense of how different the two are. Masaomi is loud, flamboyant, and expressive. I honestly thought he was gay for the longest time, even back when I watched this in middle school before I really understood what being gay was. And on the other hand, we have Mikado, who shows his rises of humor when he's interacting with Masaomi, but we definitely get the sense that he's the calmer of the two. The two go back and forth and drop some friendship lore. And through Mikado's narration, we learn that despite the time and distance between them, their friendship is still very familiar and strong, partly because they've been talking to each other almost every day using cell phones or the internet. I really love how, as we're entering the city with Mikado for the first time, they're subtly dropping little bits of lore about the city itself. Mikado mentions his fears of the color gangs, something we have no idea about outside of context clues. But due to his fears, it seems like they are a bit of a problem, which they are, as we will be circling the gangs for the whole first season of the anime. But again, we will talk about that later. Though what we do eventually get is that people who wear the same colors and gather in areas around the city are more than likely a part of the gang. There are a few color gangs that are prevalent in the anime who are named in the first episode or two. There are the Yellow Scarves, the Blue Squares, and the new kids on the block, the Colorless Dollars. And a fun thing to note is that some of the grayscale characters in the background are wearing yellow or blue. I wonder if this is to show how prevalent the gangs actually are, or if it's to represent how people see what they fear, even if it's in the background. It's probably the former, but it would be really cool if it was the latter. Anyway, right before the two emerge into the city, we get my favorite part of the whole anime, the chat room. The chat room is probably the hardest part to keep up with in the anime, as everything kind of pops up super quickly and is dispersed so randomly throughout the anime that it's, yeah, like I said, it's kind of hard to keep up with, but it's very important, the conversations that are happening within the chat room, as they are the narrative backbone of the anime and act as a bit of a Greek chorus of sorts to the events that are unfolding. There's Taro Tanaka, the blue chat, Satom, the black chat, and Kanra, the orange chat that talks way too much, though we don't see Kanra until a little bit later. During this first chat, we learn that Taro is about to move to Ikebukuro. Interesting. After walking the city streets for a few minutes talking about the gangs, the two bump into Masaomi's friends. Bear with me for a little bit because I'm about to name drop a lot of characters, as we get to meet almost the entire cast within this first episode. First, we meet the otakus, Erika and Walker. Then we meet their driver, Saburo, and their leader of sorts, Kyohei. They play an interesting role in the anime that, again, I will talk about later when we get to know them a little bit better. The only important thing to note is that Erika and Walker are the first ones to mention that Mikado's name is evocative. Oh, and we also learned that they get money through reselling manga, I think. They say other stuff after saying they bought a bunch of extra copies of a manga and giggling, and that's what I got from it. If you have any other ideas, let me know in the comments. Shortly before we get into the B plot of this whole episode, we get a moment in Mikado's head where he is contemplating all of the experiences that Masaomi had while Mikado was stuck at home. This will be a recurring theme for Mikado's story, the desire to be part of something bigger, to live a life full of experiences. Not grand experiences, just events that would never have occurred in his hometown. This kind of ties back to his poetry that he was saying at the beginning of the episode. How everything he goes through and sees in Ikebukuro is fantastical and life-changing, but it could have happened to anyone if they took the same chances he did. And now we move on to the B plot. As Mikado is having these inner thoughts, the two pass a girl in color, and as the camera focuses on her, we hear someone say, "I see her. She matches the description provided." I don't know why I gave this creepy ass dude a fucking cool ass voice. Never again. Maybe I watch too many murder mysteries, but every time I get to this scene, alarm bells start ringing in my head for this poor girl. And that feeling is confirmed as we pan to the guy who's speaking, and then to his friends in a van. One guy with the classic anime villain lips tells another not to use too much, and we can surmise through context clues that the substance that could be too much is chloroform. The guy with the chloroform says a truly sleazy line that lets us, as the audience, know that these are not very nice men. She's a teenage girl, right? That's a 50% bonus. Whoop whoop, police! I'd like to report some human trafficking. And now Kanra enters the chat. And did I mention that they talk too much? Someone will send one line to the group chat and he will rapidly send 32 in response. But he mentions something that I hope is now an uncommon event in Japan, but was a bit of a problem back in the day. Self-deletion meetups. I won't go into the topic too much because it's depressing and not allowed on all platforms to be discussing, but it's exactly what it sounds like. And it foreshadows what the B plot is all about. Kanra also lets slide that a bunch of people have recently gone missing in Ikebukuro. Mostly the disenfranchised and the desperate, illegal aliens and runaway kids. And honestly, this anime is so weird that when I first watched it back in middle school and they said illegal aliens, my brain immediately was just like, ET's in this fucking anime? No, they're literally just talking about, surprisingly, Americans that have illegally moved to Japan. The irony just gets stronger by the years. Anyways, after Conra says this, we see the girl again as the sleazeball on the phone walks up to her. He talks to her and he takes her to a third location, which, ladies and gays and a few gents out there, don't let anyone take you to a third location without backup and Find My iPhone on. Anyways, they kidnap her, and as they drive off, a man dressed in black appears, smiling. Then we get back to Mikado and Masaomi, who run into Simon, a black Russian sushi shop worker. Simon is amazing, and I love him. He is so philosophical and such an interesting character, and he's an absolute powerhouse within the city. The Yakuza are so lucky that he is a pacifist and doesn't pass his fists to everyone around him. I don't know if everyone calling him a black Russian is a pun on the drink or not. Let me know what you guys think. Anyways, Masaomi tells Mikado not to piss Simon off, and then he goes on to mention the others in Ikebukuro he should not piss off. And then we see a vending machine flying through the air like a drone. This is the work of Shizuo, a man dressed like a bartender with the strength of 57.5 elephants. Don't ask me how I did that math, but it is 100% accurate. Do not come for me. I'm a physicist. I'm not a physicist. And Shizuo is one of the people that Masaomi tells Mikado never to piss off. Then we go back to the B-plot for a moment, with the creeps in a parking garage with the girl in the trunk, waiting for their higher-ups to come and pick her up. We quickly go back to the chat, and the group is talking about the mysterious black bike rider, an urban legend of sorts. Satone wonders if they are a gang member, but Kanra claims they might not even be human. Still in the parking garage, we get to see this mysterious rider, staring down the creeps in the van. The chloroform guy gets whacked first, then the guy on the phone tasers the biker, but that doesn't faze them for long, and they pummel the creep. Big lip villain takes off, leaving his friends for dead. But the biker chases after. Lips gets scared and slams on the brakes, causing the rider to crash, their bodies sprawled. And during this very short chase, the chat is talking about the rider and how they are rumored to be a monster of some sort. And as the rider gets back up, Kanra says that they don't have a head. And sure enough, this mysterious rider is indeed headless, black smoke pluming out of their neck stump. And from the smoke, they pull out a gnarly scythe and cut lips in half. Just kidding. The scythe part is real, but it only does psychic damage. We'll unfortunately see Lips and his friends again later. Before we can see the rider rescue the girl, we cut back to Mikado and Masaomi. Should I refer to them as Eminem? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, Masaomi is finishing his detailed explanation on the people Mikado should not piss off, and he mentions the last name we get to see in this episode, Izaya. All Masaomi says about him is that he is dangerous. Then he mentions the dollars and says he doesn't know much about them, but apparently there's a lot of them, and they're all kind of nuts. And yeah, that's kind of valid. I won't tell you why that's valid until later, but remember, that is not an exaggeration. Mikado bumps into a girl with a strange scar around her neck, who screams and runs away. Then Masaomi hears the sound of a very distinct bike coming their way and runs with Mikado to go see it. And in the chat, we see that Taro and Satone both see the same event of the biker riding down the highway. Between Eminem having this touching moment of expressing how happy they are to be back together after 4 years apart, and Mikado's reflections on seeing the rider, we get to see that theme of life-changing events happening because you take a chance. One is mundane, going back to school with your best friend after years apart. And one is fantastical, seeing a headless motorcyclist. But both are equally life-changing and amazing, which is beautiful to realize. One more thing before we wrap up this episode. If you're watching the anime, you might notice a woman in purple while Mikado and Masaomi are leaving the subway at the very beginning of the episode. She has zero relevance to the story, and I believe we will never see her again, which is odd because, as I said earlier, all the non-plot important characters are grayed out. This moment is for the fans of Ryogo Narita's other work, like Baccano, as this is a very blink and you'll miss it cameo. There are many of these moments throughout the anime, with one cameo of Isaac and Maria being a bit disruptive during a pivotal moment in the anime, but they're scattered throughout and they're kind of fun to pick up. Anyways, that's it for episode 1. Oof, that was long. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Was there anything I missed? Is there anything you want me to focus on more for in the future episodes? I'll do my best to answer as many questions as you've got. In the meantime, I'll finish this story later.